In the evolutionary history of animals, there are always many firsts. The first time they moved, the first time they swam, the first time they stepped onto land, and so on. But in my view, around 228 million years ago, in the late Triassic period, the first time vertebrate animals took to the skies was the most awe-inspiring. After all, it's challenging to imagine a small fish wriggling in the mud, evolving over more than 200 million years to become the largest creatures ever to fly in the Earth's skies. This brings us to our main character today, one of the most famous groups of organisms in the Mesozoic era, the pterosaurs. First, we need to clarify that pterosaurs are not dinosaurs, although they are closely related in terms of evolution. However, unlike the dinosaurs that lived in lush, food-rich forests, the Pterosaur family was much less fortunate. The ancestors of pterosaurs likely inhabited a region roughly equivalent to modern-day Western Europe. However, during that era, Europe was more like today's Africa, covered in vast deserts and arid grasslands. Most of the animals in this region were relatively small in size due to the harsh conditions, and many survived by preying on insects. The ancestors of pterosaurs were among these small, resourceful creatures. They might have resembled something like Scleromochlus. To catch flying insects, they had to jump with all their might. But in the desert, insects were scarce resources, and to reach them, you had to jump high, stay in the air for an extended period, yet not expend too much energy. The ancestors of pterosaurs found a solution to this challenging problem. They extended their skin membranes to optimize their aerodynamic shape. As a result, jumping gradually evolved into gliding, bringing them one step closer to taking to the skies. However, that final step was exceptionally cruel. Over 230 million years ago, torrential rain poured down upon the colossal desert of Pangaea. Yes, it was the extended rainy season known as the Carnian pluvial event, lasting nearly 2 million years, as we've discussed before. However, for the animals in the desert, this was far from good news. The incessant rainfall dramatically altered the landscape of their homeland. Gigantic trees sprouted from what was once barren wasteland, and along with the forest came a multitude of previously unheard of fierce predators. Life went from a mode of hardship to a living hell in an instant. However, driven by the determination to survive, the ancestors of pterosaurs continued to evolve their gliding capabilities, pushing further along the path. Gradually, their wing membranes became wider and more complex, incorporating a highly sophisticated muscular system that allowed for nimble changes in wing membrane shape. Today's human aircraft also follow the same principles. Simultaneously, they greatly reinforced their air sac system and chest, making their bodies not only more lightweight, but also providing the wings with ample power. Unbeknownst to them, gliding gradually transformed into true flight. And that's how pterosaurs came into existence. As far as we know, the earliest pterosaurs were found in Europe and were known as Priondactylia. Their bodies still retained a terrestrial animal pattern similar to Scleromochlus, but they had undoubtedly acquired the ability to fly. Priondactylia's forelimbs were twice as long as their hind limbs, and they had an elongated nameless finger, sufficient to support the wing membrane for flight. Flight immediately brought pterosaurs abundant rewards. In the dense canopy of the forest, a vast population of insects thrived. Due to their dominance of the skies over the past 100 million years, these insects had grown enormous. There were gigatitans with wingspans exceeding 30 centimeters and Colossocossus with wingspans measuring half a meter. Although the Pterosaur family was a relatively niche group during the Triassic period, with limited species primarily confined to Europe, these pioneers of the skies undoubtedly held tremendous potential. With their small size and a food source that would never run dry, insects, the Pterosaur family successfully survived the Triassic-Jurassic extinction event and experienced explosive diversification during the Jurassic period. Flight granted pterosaurs incredible migratory abilities. During the Jurassic period, forests covered the entire world, prompting pterosaurs to adapt to various environments. They underwent a series of modifications, significantly optimizing their aerodynamic body shapes. Furthermore, their skeletons became lighter and their heads grew larger to enhance sensory and feeding capabilities. Additionally, pterosaurs possessed some traditional metatarsalian features, such as maintaining a constant body temperature and having surface covering fur. Yes, you read that correctly, pterosaurs had fur. Their fur resembled a middle ground between the simple body hair of beasts and the feathers of dinosaurs, providing them with good insulation and aiding in airflow control over their bodies. As a result, the vast skies became a safe haven for pterosaurs, where they could thrive. Some pterosaurs chose to explore new ecological niches. For example, Rhamphorhynchus migrated to areas near water and began fishing for a living. However, perhaps the early struggles for survival instilled a sense of crisis in the genes of pterosaurs. They were constantly pursuing stronger physical qualities and more ecological niches. Starting from the late Jurassic, a group of pterosaurs with perfected flying skills began to rise, known as Pterodactylidae. Pterodactylidae discarded almost all unnecessary weight, including their tails and, in many cases, their teeth. Coupled with streamlined aerodynamic shapes, Pterodactylidae became an unstoppable aerial force, pushing the Pterosaur empire to its zenith. The presence of pterosaurs extended to every corner of the world. Building upon their fishing abilities, some pterosaurs took unique evolutionary paths. For example, Liaodactylus primus transformed its teeth into comb-like structures to filter small animals from the water. At the extreme end of this evolutionary path were creatures like Pterodaustrini, which resembled flying whales. Meanwhile, Dasyungaripterus developed shovel-like beaks and grinding teeth, specialized for preying on various shellfish. Lonchodects evolved into omnivorous animals, while some, like Tapejara, switched to a herbivorous diet. There were even scavenging pterosaurs like Istiodactylus. Of course, the Ajdarchidae family of pterosaurs, known for their gigantic size, preyed on small animals, including dinosaur hatchlings, and were favorites among paleontology enthusiasts. In summary, pterosaurs explored virtually every imaginable method of survival for flying creatures in less than 100 million years. This extensive evolution experimentation resulted in the discovery of a vast number of Pterosaur fossils worldwide, posing quite a challenge for paleontologists when it came to naming these creatures. Around 130 million years ago, in the Cretaceous period, the prosperity of the Pterosaur empire was beyond imagination. However, at this time, a new force was brewing. Starting from the Jurassic period, a group of dinosaurs called Maniraptora continuously enhanced the feathers on their bodies, eventually giving rise to a completely new species, birds. The emergence of birds foreshadowed the downfall of the Pterosaur empire. In fact, the earliest birds were quite humble compared to the pterosaurs of the time. However, birds had wings composed of feathers, which were much more adaptable than Pterosaur's membranous wings. Pterosaur wings could be easily damaged, leaving scars, while feathers could be replaced if damaged. This made feathers highly suitable for flying in narrow spaces like tree canopies. Furthermore, feathers were more convenient to modify in later evolution. Over approximately 20 million years, birds gradually replaced pterosaurs in the canopy layer. By around 120 million years ago, small insect-eating pterosaurs in the forests had gone extinct, and birds began to encroach on other pterosaur territories. During the mid-Cretaceous period, around 110 million years ago, it seemed that pterosaur diversity had reached its peak, with some giant aerial rulers making their appearance. However, upon closer examination, it was evident that smaller pterosaurs with wingspans of less than 2 meters were in decline. This decline continued into the late Cretaceous period. It became apparent that the Pterosaur family members had grown in size. Still, this increase in size required more food and a broader, suitable environment. When environmental changes occurred, it dealt a heavy blow to the Pterosaur empire. Around 90 million years ago, a significant environmental change occurred. During that time, a global marine event caused widespread oxygen depletion in the oceans, which is known as the Cenomanian-Turonian extinction event. Previously mentioned that wiped out many marine reptiles, including ichthyosaurs. Generally, oceanic oxygen depletion had a relatively small impact on terrestrial environments, so most land-dwelling animals were not significantly affected. However, the Pterosaur empire suffered a severe decline. While pterosaurs did not go extinct during this event, and even experienced a partial recovery afterward, it exposed their vulnerability to environmental upheaval. Following this event, the once vast Pterosaur family had only 2 surviving branches. Some paleontology enthusiasts consider this period as the pinnacle of the Pterosaur empire. After all, during the subsequent 30 million years, 2 of the largest flying animals in Earth's history emerged, Quetzalcoatlus and Nyctosaurus. Quetzalcoatlus had a wingspan of up to 12 meters and could cover long distances with a single wing beat. Nyctosaurus also had a relatively large size. However, I view this period not as a renaissance, but more like the twilight of a dynasty. The increase in size made pterosaurs less adaptable to environmental changes, and extravagant features often indicate resource scarcity and intensified intraspecies competition. Finally, around 65 million years ago, that massive asteroid impact struck Earth. In an instant, it overturned the entire Earth's ecosystem. All animals larger than 1 meter in size were destined for extinction, including the pterosaurs. It can be said that this asteroid gave the Pterosaur empire a dignified and spectacular farewell. This catastrophic event left us with a legendary tale of ancient creatures soaring to the skies amidst a dire situation. This is an ancient discovery. See you in the next video.